Ezra, your methods are outdated. The board believes it's time for fresh innovation. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Kael Morrison, my business partner of 14 years, sat across from me in our Austin headquarters conference room, flanked by 3 board members I barely recognized. The paperwork was already prepared, clean, legal, and absolutely ruthless. My name is Ezra Blackwood. I'm 52 years old, and I built NextTech Innovations from a garage startup into a $50 million hardware company. But according to the man sitting across from me, the same man who used to call me a genius, I was now too old school for the tech industry. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply nodded, signed where they pointed, and said, "Good luck with that, Kael." 14 years. That's how long Kael and I had been partners, building this company from nothing but late-night coding sessions and a shared vision of revolutionizing industrial automation. I was the engineer, the inventor, the one who lived in the lab creating breakthrough technologies. Kael was the businessman, the smooth talker who could sell ice to penguins and make venture capitalists write checks with his charismatic presentations. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Kael talked about fresh innovation and cutting-edge approaches, I was the one who'd actually invented the core technology that made our company valuable. But somewhere along the way, he'd convinced himself, and apparently the board, that my hands-on, methodical approach was holding us back from becoming the next unicorn startup. The meeting lasted exactly 23 minutes. 23 minutes to dismantle 14 years of partnership, friendship, and shared dreams. The board members spoke in corporate buzzwords about strategic pivots and modernizing leadership. Kael nodded gravely, occasionally glancing at me with what I assume he thought was sympathy. But as I cleaned out my office that afternoon, packing my engineering notebooks and the prototype devices I'd built by hand, I couldn't help but smile. Because there was something Kael didn't know. Something he'd forgotten in all his focus on boardroom politics and investor presentations. Something that was about to change everything. I wasn't always a tech entrepreneur. Before NextTech, I spent 10 years working as a senior engineer at Microcore Systems, designing industrial automation equipment that most people never see but that keeps the world running. I was the guy who figured out how to make assembly lines 40% more efficient, how to reduce manufacturing defects to near zero, how to create systems so reliable they could run for years without human intervention. My colleagues called me the professor because I approached every problem methodically, documenting everything, testing relentlessly, and never cutting corners. While other engineers rushed to market with flashy prototypes, I built systems that actually worked in the real world. I held 9 patents from my time at Microcore, each one representing months of careful research and development. The thing about being an engineer is that you learn to think in systems. Every component has to work perfectly with every other component. There's no room for ego or politics when you're designing something that has to function flawlessly for years. That mindset shaped everything about how I approached business later. I lived in a modest ranch house in Cedar Park, drove a 10-year-old Toyota Camry, and spent my weekends either in my home workshop or hiking the trails around Austin. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just trying to solve problems that mattered. Kael, on the other hand, had always been different. He came from money. His father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across Texas. Kael had the kind of natural charisma that made people want to follow him, the ability to walk into a room and immediately become the center of attention. He wore expensive suits, drove a Tesla, and lived in a penthouse downtown. But here's what most people didn't understand about Kael. Underneath all that polish, he was genuinely brilliant at understanding what people wanted before they knew they wanted it. While I was focused on making things work, he was focused on making people care. That combination of technical depth and market intuition was what made our partnership so powerful in the early days. We complemented each other perfectly. I created the innovations. He created the demand for them. Kael and I met at a tech meetup in downtown Austin back in 2011. I had just finished presenting a prototype for a new type of precision actuator that could revolutionize manufacturing robotics. It was highly technical, probably boring to most of the audience, but it represented a genuine breakthrough in industrial automation. After my presentation, this guy in an expensive suit approached me. "Ezra Blackwood," he said, extending his hand. "That was brilliant, but you completely lost them after slide 3. I was annoyed. The engineering speaks for itself. "Engineering doesn't speak," he replied with a grin. "People speak. And right now, your engineering is whispering when it should be shouting. I'm Kael Morrison." We talked for 3 hours that night at a nearby coffee shop. Kael understood the market potential of my inventions better than I did. He saw applications I hadn't considered, revenue streams I hadn't imagined. More importantly, he saw how to communicate the value of complex technology to people who needed it but didn't understand it. "You're sitting on a gold mine," he told me, "but you're treating it like a science project." 6 months later, we incorporated NextTech innovations. I contributed my patents and technical expertise. Kael contributed his business acumen and a small investment from his father's network. We split ownership 50-50 and shook hands on a partnership that would change both our lives. Our first office was a 1,200 square foot space in an industrial complex east of Austin. I set up a lab in the back. Kael created a showroom in the front. We had one employee, Marina Rodriguez, a brilliant young engineer I'd recruited from UT who could translate my complex designs into manufacturable products. Those early days were magical. We were building something real, something that would make manufacturing more efficient and create jobs. Kael would bring in potential clients, I'd demonstrate the technology, and Marina would figure out how to scale production. We were a perfect team. For the first 8 years, NextTech was everything we dreamed it could be. Our precision automation systems transformed how companies approached manufacturing. We helped a furniture company in Dallas reduce production time by 35%. We enabled a medical device manufacturer in Houston to achieve 6 Sigma quality standards. We made complex manufacturing processes simple and reliable. Kael was the face of the company, speaking at industry conferences and building relationships with major clients. I stayed in the background, constantly improving our technology and developing new innovations. Marina led our engineering team, which had grown to 12 brilliant engineers who shared my obsession with building things that worked perfectly. Our revenue grew steadily, $2 million in year 2, $8 million in year 4, $25 million by year 8. We weren't the fastest growing startup in Austin, but we were profitable, sustainable, and genuinely valuable to our customers. More importantly, we were friends, real friends. Kael was my best man when I married Sarah in 2016. When my father had a heart attack the following year, Kael flew back from a trade show in Germany to be at the hospital. We celebrated every major milestone together, shared every major stress, and genuinely trusted each other with our futures. I remember the night we signed our biggest contract ever, a $4.2 million deal with Apex Manufacturing to automate their entire production line. We sat in my backyard, drinking beer and watching the stars, talking about how far we'd come from that coffee shop conversation 8 years earlier. "We did it, Ezra," Kael said. "We actually built something that matters." "We're just getting started," I replied. I meant it. I had been working on something revolutionary, a new type of adaptive control system that could learn and optimize manufacturing processes in real time. It was the kind of breakthrough that comes along once in a decade, the technology that would make everything else obsolete. I called it the Prometheus System, and it was going to change everything. The first crack in our partnership appeared in late 2019, right around the time I filed the patent for the Prometheus System. Kael had been talking more and more about scaling for explosive growth and positioning for a major exit event. The language he used started sounding less like engineering and more like venture capital pitch decks. "We need to think bigger, Ezra," he'd say during our weekly strategy meetings. "The market is shifting. Our customers don't just want better automation. They want smart factories, AI-driven optimization, Internet of Things integration. We're still selling them better hammers when they need entire tool sheds." At first I thought he was just being ambitious. But then he started bringing in consultants, expensive ones from firms like McKinsey and Deloitte, who specialized in digital transformation and technology modernization. These consultants spoke in buzzwords and created PowerPoint presentations that turned our straightforward engineering solutions into complex diagrams full of clouds and arrows. The consultants recommended restructuring our entire approach. Instead of focusing on precision and reliability, the things that had made us successful, we should pivot toward artificial intelligence, machine learning, and predictive analytics. They wanted us to become a technology platform rather than a manufacturing solutions company. I pushed back hard during those meetings. Our customers need systems that work, not systems that sound impressive in presentations, I argued. We've built our reputation on engineering excellence, not marketing hype. Kael's response bothered me. Engineering excellence doesn't scale, Ezra. We need to modernize our thinking if we want to compete with the big players. But the real warning sign came when Kael hired a new head of product development, Jasper Chen, a young hotshot from Silicon Valley who had worked at 3 different startups and spoke fluent venture capital. Jasper was brilliant, no doubt, but he had never actually built anything that had to work in a real factory with real consequences for failure. During our first team meeting with Jasper, he dismissed our existing product line as legacy technology and proposed rebuilding everything from scratch using modern architectures and agile methodologies. That's when I realized Kael was embarrassed by our methodical approach to engineering. The systematic undermining began subtly. Kael started scheduling client meetings without including me, claiming that my technical deep dives were overwhelming for executives who just wanted to understand business value. He hired a marketing team that repositioned our company messaging, removing references to our engineering heritage and emphasizing our innovative AI capabilities. Our new marketing materials barely mentioned the actual technology that powered our systems. Instead, they focused on abstract concepts like digital transformation and Industry 4.0 readiness. When I complained that we were misrepresenting our capabilities, Kael told me I was thinking too small. The real betrayal started when Kael began presenting my Prometheus system to investors without involving me in the development or go-to-market strategy. I'd spent 3 years perfecting this adaptive control technology, solving complex problems in real-time optimization that had stumped engineering teams at companies like Siemens and ABB. But in Kael's presentations, Prometheus became revolutionary AI-powered manufacturing intelligence. He stripped away all the technical details that explained how it actually worked and replaced them with marketing speak about machine learning algorithms and predictive analytics engines. When I confronted him about misrepresenting the technology, his response shocked me. Ezra, you're too focused on how things work instead of what they can become. Investors don't care about your engineering process. They care about market potential and scalable revenue models. The final straw came when I discovered that Kael had been meeting with potential acquirers behind my back. A mutual contact at AMD mentioned casually that Kael had pitched NextTech as an acquisition target, emphasizing our cutting-edge AI portfolio and experienced leadership team ready for rapid scaling. No mention of the fact that I had invented every significant technology in our portfolio. No acknowledgement that our AI capabilities were actually sophisticated engineering solutions I'd developed through years of methodical research. When I confronted Kael about these meetings, he didn't deny them. Instead, he said something that chilled me to the bone. The market has moved beyond individual inventors, Ezra. Companies like ours need visionary leadership, not workshop tinkering. That's when I realized he was planning to remove me entirely. The coup happened on a Thursday morning in March 2025. I walked into what I thought was our regular weekly strategy meeting to find 3 board members I'd never seen before sitting alongside Kael and our longtime board chair, Patricia Henley. The conference table was covered with legal documents, financial projections, and organizational charts that didn't include my name. Ezra, Patricia began uncomfortably, we've been discussing the future direction of NextTech, and the board has some concerns about our leadership structure. Kael took over smoothly, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. The industry is evolving rapidly toward AI-driven solutions and platform-based business models. Our investors believe we need leadership that can navigate this transition effectively. The new board members, venture capital partners who had invested in our latest funding round, spoke in the polished language of corporate restructuring. They talked about optimizing for growth, aligning with market dynamics, and positioning for strategic partnerships. What they didn't say, but what was written clearly in the documents they slid across the table, was that I was being removed as Chief Technology Officer and would transition to an advisory role with no operational authority. My equity stake would be bought out at fair market value over 18 months. Kael would become sole CEO with full control over technology development and strategic direction. This isn't personal, one of the VCs explained. It's about ensuring NextTech can scale effectively in a competitive marketplace. Your engineering background is valuable, but we need leadership with experience in modern technology platforms. I looked around the table at faces that ranged from uncomfortable to coldly professional. These people were talking about removing me from the company I'd built, using technology I'd invented, in language that made my life's work sound like an obstacle to progress. "Any questions, Ezra?" Kael asked. I had just one. "When did you decide I was the problem?" Kael's mask slipped for half a second. "It's not about you being a problem. It's about positioning the company for the future." I signed the papers without reading them, shook hands with everyone in the room, and walked back to my office to pack my things. 14 years of partnership, friendship, and shared dreams, reduced to a transition timeline and a non-compete clause. But as I packed my engineering notebooks and personal prototypes, I couldn't stop thinking about something Kael had forgotten in his rush to modernize everything. Something very important. That evening, I sat in my home office surrounded by 14 years of documentation, patents, and legal agreements. My wife Sarah found me there at midnight, still reading through the paperwork Kael's lawyers had prepared. "How bad is it?" she asked, setting a cup of coffee beside me. "Financially? We'll be fine. The buyout terms are generous." I looked up from the documents. But that's not what bothers me. What does? I pulled out a folder I'd been avoiding all evening, my patent portfolio. Kael made a critical mistake. He so focused on positioning himself as a visionary leader that he forgot about the actual technology that makes this company valuable. Sarah sat down beside me. "Explain it to me like I'm not an engineer." I opened to the first document in the folder, patent number 10,847,392, filed in my name alone 3 years earlier. Remember the Prometheus System? The adaptive control technology that Kael's been pitching to investors as our revolutionary AI platform? The one you've been working on in the garage for the past 3 years? Exactly. Kael thinks it belongs to NextTech because I developed it while working for the company. But he never read the development agreement we signed when we started the company. I showed her the relevant clause, highlighted in yellow from when I'd reviewed it with our lawyer years earlier. Any technology developed using personal resources during personal time, using pre-existing knowledge from previous employment, remains the intellectual property of the inventor, unless explicitly transferred to the company. Sarah's eyes widened. "You own the Prometheus patent personally?" Not just Prometheus. 7 core patents that represent about 70% of our current technology portfolio, including the 3 patents that make our manufacturing automation systems actually work. The development agreement had been Kael's idea originally, a way to protect both of us if the company failed. He wanted to ensure that his business development work couldn't be claimed by the company, and I wanted to protect the engineering innovations I'd been developing since my time at Microcore. But surely he knows this. I shook my head. Kael stopped paying attention to technical details years ago. He's so focused on high-level strategy and investor relations that he delegated all the patent management to our legal team. He probably assumes everything automatically belongs to NextTech. The irony was perfect. While Kael had been positioning himself as the visionary leader and me as the outdated engineer, he'd forgotten that visionaries without actual technology are just expensive consultants. "What does this mean practically?" Sarah asked. I smiled for the first time all day. "It means NextTech just lost the right to use the technology that makes them valuable. And it means I'm about to have some very interesting conversations with our biggest clients." I waited exactly 1 week before making my first move. Long enough for Kael to feel confident about his new leadership role, but not long enough for him to discover what he'd overlooked. My first call was to Richard Kellner, the chief operations officer at Meridian Manufacturing, our largest client. We'd worked together for 5 years, transforming their production efficiency from industry worst to industry leading using my precision automation systems. Ezra, Richard sounded genuinely happy to hear from me. I heard about the transition at NextTech. Everything okay? That's actually why I'm calling, Richard. I wanted to give you a heads up about some changes that might affect your operations. What kind of changes? Well, the automation systems currently running your production lines are based on patent technology that I own personally. With my departure from NextTech, there might be some complications regarding ongoing support and future upgrades. Silence on the other end. Then, what exactly does that mean for us? It means NextTech no longer has the legal right to service, modify, or upgrade the systems currently running your factory. If you need technical support or want to expand your automation capabilities, you'll need to work directly with me. Jesus, Ezra, how many other clients are in this situation? I had spent the previous evening making that exact calculation. About 14 major installations, representing roughly $7.5 million in annual recurring support revenue for NextTech. And Kael doesn't know this yet. Kael thinks he just acquired a technology company. What he actually acquired is a sales and marketing organization that no longer has rights to its core technology. Richard was quiet for a moment. What are you planning to do? I'm exploring options. If you're interested in ensuring continuity for your operations, I'd be happy to discuss a direct support arrangement. Similar conversations followed with other major clients over the next few days. Apex Manufacturing, Precision Dynamics, Continental Assembly, companies that had invested millions in automation systems based on my patented technology, all suddenly facing uncertainty about their future support and upgrade paths. The response was unanimous. They wanted to work directly with me, not with whatever NextTech had become under Kael's leadership. But I had to be careful. My non-compete agreement prevented me from actively soliciting NextTech clients for 6 months. However, it said nothing about responding to client inquiries or providing technical support for systems I had legally designed and patented. The distinction would prove crucial. Kael called me on a Friday afternoon, exactly 12 days after my departure. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Ezra, I need to understand something. Richard Kellner from Meridian just called asking about patent ownership for their automation systems. What did you tell him? I told him the truth, that I own the patents for the technology running his factory, and that NextTech no longer has rights to service or modify those systems. That's impossible. All technology developed for NextTech belongs to the company. Check Section 7 of our original development agreement, Kael. The one you insisted we sign to protect our individual contributions. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. This is corporate sabotage, Ezra. You're trying to destroy the company out of spite. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm clarifying ownership rights that you apparently forgot about when you decided I was too old school to continue working with. Those patents belong to NextTech. No, Kael, those patents belong to me. NextTech had a license to use them while I was a partner. That license terminated when you forced me out. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Kael spoke again, his voice was different, smaller, uncertain. What do you want? I want you to understand what you just did. You removed the inventor from a technology company, assuming the technology would stay behind. It doesn't work that way. Over the next 2 weeks, Kael's carefully constructed vision of NextTech's future began collapsing. Major clients started requesting meetings to discuss transition arrangements for their systems. The venture capital investors who had supported my removal began asking uncomfortable questions about the company's intellectual property portfolio. Kael hired patent lawyers and filed emergency motions claiming that my patents belonged to NextTech under work-for-hire provisions. But our original development agreement was ironclad. I'd been careful about that, even if he hadn't. The real revelation came when Marina Rodriguez, my former engineering manager, called me at home. Ezra, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice shaking. Kael asked me to review all the patents in our portfolio and identify which ones might be problematic for the company moving forward. And 70% of our core technology is covered by patents that list you as the sole inventor. Without those patents, NextTech can't legally manufacture, service, or upgrade most of our product line. What did you tell Kael? I told him the truth. That you're not just the co-founder who got pushed out. You're the inventor whose technology makes this company valuable. Without you, we're basically a sales organization selling products we no longer have the right to make. Marina had worked with both Kael and me for 9 years. She understood the technology as well as anyone, and had no illusions about which one of us was actually essential to the company's future. There's more, she continued. Kael's been trying to reverse engineer your Prometheus system to create a clean room version that wouldn't infringe your patents. But he doesn't understand the underlying principles well enough to recreate it. How do you know? Because he asked me to lead the project. I quit yesterday. 6 months later, I incorporated Blackwood Technologies in a small office building in Round Rock, 15 minutes from where Kael and I had started NextTech 14 years earlier. Marina joined me as Chief Engineering Officer, along with 4 other engineers who had left NextTech after my departure. My first official client was Meridian Manufacturing. Richard Kellner didn't hesitate when I offered to continue supporting their automation systems under a direct service agreement. We're not loyal to your old company, Ezra, he told me. We're loyal to the person who solved our problems and delivered results. By the end of my first year, Blackwood Technologies had contracts with 11 major manufacturing companies, annual revenue of $4.2 million, and a development pipeline that would have made the old NextTech envious. More importantly, we were building exactly what our clients needed: sophisticated, reliable automation systems that worked perfectly in real-world conditions. NextTech's collapse was swift and comprehensive. Without the right to use the core patents that powered their technology, they couldn't fulfill existing contracts or develop new products. The venture capital investors who had supported Kael's vision of a modern, AI-driven platform company discovered they had bought a sales organization with no products to sell. Kael tried several desperate measures. He attempted to negotiate patent licensing agreements with me, offering generous terms and even partnership opportunities. When I declined, he hired teams of engineers to develop competing technology that wouldn't infringe my patents. But breakthrough engineering doesn't happen on venture capital timelines. The final blow came when 3 major clients filed breach of contract lawsuits against NextTech for failing to provide promised system upgrades and technical support. Without access to my patents, NextTech simply couldn't deliver the services they had contracted to provide. 18 months after pushing me out for being too old school, Kael Morrison shut down NextTech Innovations and liquidated the company's assets to pay creditors. I felt no satisfaction reading about the closure in the Austin Business Journal. Kael and I had built something valuable together once, something that helped real companies solve real problems. Watching it disappear felt like losing a piece of my own history. But some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some partnerships can't be rebuilt. I kept one memento from our time together: a photo of Kael and me shaking hands with our first major client, both of us grinning like kids who had just won the science fair. It sits on my desk now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that innovation without integrity is just expensive marketing. A reminder that technology belongs to the people who understand it deeply enough to make it work. A reminder that being old school sometimes means remembering what actually matters. Last month, my daughter visited the Blackwood Technologies office during her spring break from MIT. She walked around the lab, watching our engineers design and test new automation systems, seeing how we solve complex problems through careful engineering and methodical testing. "Dad," she said afterward, "this feels different from corporate offices I visited. More honest, I guess. Like everyone actually believes in what they're building." That evening, I sat on my back deck looking out over the Austin Hills, thinking about the difference between building technology and building a technology company, between solving problems and selling solutions, between being an engineer and being an entrepreneur. Some people might say I won, that I got revenge on the partner who betrayed me and proved that engineering excellence matters more than marketing hype. But I prefer to think I just remembered who I was: an engineer who builds things that work.